Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I am your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from a sunny Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And today we're going to talk about the counterintuitive culture. Before we get started, we have a few things, just a few tidbits, we're calling them. Well, first of all, every 12 years, when you have a Vedic temple, every 12 years you do a Kumbhabhishekam. It's sort of renews the power and the Shakti of the temple. And so sometime probably around May, we're looking for a date. The pundit is looking for good Muhurta, it's called, appropriate date. And so it's like a re-inauguration of the temple. So, boy, I'll tell you, when we inaugurated the temple the first time, what was it? That's 2007, I guess. It was incredible. And well, it was a few years after that, because that's when we started to build the temple. But at any rate, there are 10 pundits there. I'm looking forward to seeing them again. And all kinds of ceremonies, and just the power of the place is phenomenal. And so we're all excited about it. We'll be doing that again, probably around May. And so that'll be something really fantastic. And if you can make it, you're more than welcome to come to that. It's a 3-day ceremony. Saw a nice quote I liked. Craftsmanship is steeped in tradition. A beautiful quote. I know I bought some, I used to do woodworking. I've become too busy ever since I started Mount Soma, really. But I bought some Japanese handmade wood chisels, different sizes and that. And I love them, even though I haven't used them for years, just because the craftsmanship is so exquisite, And it makes you think, you even look at these cultures like of the Native Americans, for example, or any of these cultures in the jungles of the Amazon or what have you, and how did they know how to do these things, and the knowledge they have of herbs and things like that. All of those things are just from tradition, and the knowledge from traditions, and I think that's something that, in a way, the reverence for traditions perhaps gets lost a little bit in a scientific age, because we don't really think of it even as tradition as so much as intellectual understanding, But the beauty of tradition and the value of tradition, not just with respect to technology, but with respect to culture in general. Somehow that simple little quote carries that value. Craftsmanship is an art. It's a beauty. Anyway, nice little quote. Another quote that I liked, far too many people lack the courage of their deepest inner convictions. It makes me think of something. Oh, the president of Brazil had a nice quote. He said that. I wish I could remember it word for word, but he was saying that no country can be overthrown when the people are strong, when the people are armed, I think he even said. And I've heard other people say that. There's an Eastern European, I think he was prime minister or president years ago, he said that that's what kept the country from being overrun by the Russians, actually. And it's a quality of inner strength. It's a quality of courage. These days, I think commonly what's going on really in society is that these days too many minds, too many hearts are really blown in the winds of karma. The inner strength, the inner conviction is really been swept away by social trends, cultural whims, really. Something else I think merits thinking about. Hatred, even not just internationally, not just globally, but hatred seems to be a popular emotion these days. You know, it seems vogue to hate your neighbors. It seems vogue to hate, and that's, you know, in the community level, international level, national level. Judgment seems rampant, you know. But really, what one thing to say about hatred is that it seems to carry with it the inability, relates to the previous concept. It seems to carry with it the inability to speak out our feelings without losing our balance. Isn't that inherent in the nature of hatred? If we could really speak to one another and communicate our feelings, our convictions, our beliefs, our heartfelt convictions without, you know, spilling over into really hatred, the world would be so much of a better place, you know. I was driving down the freeway. Brian, who's the site foreman here at Mount Soma, he and I do a lot of things together, you know, just different errands we run for Mount Soma. And a lot of times we have to purchase things, and I like to be there, just, you know, put in my 2 cents worth. And driving down the Route 40, you know, you'll see a lot of Christian Bible quotes and things. And one of them said, Jesus saves. Did I talk about this on a previous podcast, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus saves. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you've got that transcendental value. And Jesus is the embodiment of that transcendental value. That's what, you know, Jesus the Christ. Christ is Chaitanya. And so that value is what, when that wells up through a person's life, that's what feeds us with that bala, that inner strength, that inner divinity. And that's what saves us. And then also the concept of confession. Oh, yeah. I thought it was interesting because it was a Baptist church. And I thought confession was really a characteristic of the Catholic Church. Isn't that right? I don't know if it's Baptist or not. At any rate, outside Baptist church, there was this quote about confession. And so I was asking Brian what he thought confession was from a Vedic perspective, you know. And certainly on one level, confession, I mean, you get it off our chest, you know, and just even that's independent of any sort of organizational religion, confession can have a value, you know. But what about on a deeper level? What is confession on a deeper level? Confession has some meaning of absolving the soul, of freeing us of karma, negative karma, bad karma, right? Forgiving us of our sins in some sense. And so there are different levels of confession, different degrees of freedom from sin. And so in one sense, you might say meditation is a very powerful form of confession, if you will, because it, you know, dissolves negative karma. How does it do that? Well, it brings the awareness to a level where we align with the Christ, it'll align with Chaitanya, align with that inner divinity. Jesus saves, you know, the same idea. And so in so doing, we absolve the sin, you know. And there are different techniques that can be employed. It's called tapas, you know, different forms of tapas, you know. So that's I think, a deeper understanding of confession, the different levels of confession, and the mechanics of confession, and how we can make confession in that sense a more powerful thing. So, and saw another nice quote: "Consider how hard it is to change yourself, and you'll understand what little chance we have in trying to change others." I mean, it's hard enough to change ourselves. What chance do we have of changing others? I know in my classes that I gave I talked until I was blue in the face. I gave classes all over. I do 4-day classes, 3-day weekends, 4 times a year in New York and San Francisco and LA and of course Asheville and Mount Soma. And people found them unbelievably inspiring and profound. And I heard so many times, "Oh, I've been looking for this my whole life and I'll never miss another class." And it's all very inspiring. But people, it's not easy for people to really change. They hear it, they want to change. And it's hard for people to change themselves. And it's even harder to help people change. And people want to change, and they want to change fast. But we're talking about human evolution, we're talking about spiritual evolution. We're talking about evolution. And people want a big, huge, instant transformation. And so if they can feel a kaboom, that's what they're looking for, and that's what they want. And, I've talked about left-handed tantra, and now left-handed tantra, if somebody can detonate a person's third eye, it's exploded, and all of a sudden, boom, light's flooding in, and they think they're instantly enlightened, that's the kind of thing that people are suckers for, really. And so to really, like I like to say, chakras are meant to blossom, not detonate, And so it takes a steady hand on the rudder to really, truly evolve. Anyway, enough on that. Anything you want to add to any of this stuff I just said, Sky?
Well, I think it speaks to your counterintuitive theme earlier, which is everybody, regardless of the state of their own foundation, wants to help everybody else and find out how to fix them, but they don't, that's what I keep saying is what's wrong with, we need to raise the level of our own. We have to build ourselves first, work on ourselves before, you help others. It's kind of like on the plane where you have to put your mask over your face before you help somebody else. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessary, but, or maybe you could speak to that. Is it, you know what I mean? Because everybody wants to fix everybody else, but they don't look at their own need.
It's easier to see what other people's issues are than to see your own issues. I mean, that's just the way it is, And I think it's really interesting that you can get a bunch of people together, and I think it's common for people to, oh yeah, they'll talk about other people behind their back, which isn't constructive. And it can easily turn into gossip and negativity, but they can all easily agree, oh yeah, this person has this issue and they really shouldn't do that, but they just do. Of course, when the person's in the room, they wouldn't say it. It's just too hard. And if they did, then the person just gets offended and just stirs negativity, and it doesn't go anywhere. But like you're saying, to look in the mirror and for a person to turn that on themselves, they just don't, they're not able to do it, so the whole process is very difficult. We can meditate. And again, the process of evolution is greatly enhanced and greatly facilitated. And that's the most powerful tool for the individual. But few people are really willing to do that twice a day, regularly, every day, like that. which is why we're, at Mount Sommer, we're building this unified field generator, which radiates that Chaitanya value, the Christ value, out to the world. And that's a process too. But at least that way, we air condition, so to speak, the whole environment, so that we purify the environment, and through that, people evolve, And that's, I think, probably the most powerful tool. Because even if individuals are inspired, I hear these lectures, I'm going to meditate every day, I'll never miss another lecture. The world is sticky. You go out there and you get sucked in, and that's it. And in this, it's funny world right now. Again, to get on with the counterintuitive culture we live in, the whole thing is so convoluted that if a line of reasoning is not counterintuitive, it's almost like we're in a world where then people won't believe it. For example, I think it's just common sense, isn't it? I mean, we've lost touch with what is common sense. What we sense into that level of life, that unified field, that Christ value, that Chaitanya value, that one thing that's the source of life in everything, that is a source of health. We've lost touch with that. And so we get caught up in these counterintuitive mentalities that tell us that it's a good idea, for example, to have transsexual parties for kindergartners. And that is so counterintuitive. But in a counterintuitive culture where the thinking is so convoluted, that the people conclude that's got to be right. It's a counterintuitive culture. Now, there are some things, rarely, not all the time. There are some things that are counterintuitive that turn out to be true. For example, in the northern hemisphere, the sun is closer to the earth in the winter when it's cold. But that's because the earth is at an angle. So when the sun is closer, it's not a direct hit from the heat of the sun. And so it kind of deflects off. Whereas in the summertime, the sun is further away, but it's a direct hit, and so it's hotter. Okay, so it's counterintuitive. The sun is closer in the winter. Okay, that's a counterintuitive thing that turns out to be valid. And there are different counterintuitive things like that, but they're rare. But we live in a world where if it's not counterintuitive, people don't believe it. They only believe things that are counterintuitive. It's the whole thing is convoluted. And I think it's largely, I don't know how it started, but it seems to be vogue now. Was it born out of a drug culture? Maybe so, because, it did really, this whole counterculture, and what is a culture? A culture is a thing that cultures the awareness of the people. It's all about tradition, isn't it? It goes right back to that quote. What was that quote about? There's a beautiful quote. I said it right in the beginning. Craftsmanship is steeped in tradition. Craftsmanship is a beautiful word. We can expand the definition of craftsmanship. It's not just about building wood chisels. It's about the craftsmanship where we culture life, we culture our hearts, and it's steeped in tradition. It's culturing life. But now it's counterculture. It's counterintuitive. And it's become vogue. And I think really the counterintuitive culture really took hold and became popular along with the hippie movement, the drug movement, when that became popular, when that became mainstream back in what, the 60s? Your life is a result of the decisions you make. And if you just think about it, if you just look at the volume, the sheer volume of drugs and alcohol that's consumed and the way that affects the mind, the mode of thinking, it gives a reason for pause. You know, we do well to stop and think. We need to take a new tack. Now, intuition, counterintuitive. On one level, you know, on a most pragmatic daily level, what is intuition? It's really just common sense. You know, just using our common sense, our intuition. But intuition has, you know, deeper and deeper and deeper levels to it, doesn't it? Everything does. Particularly in the Vedic tuition, any word you pull out has very profound, deep levels and daily levels and all sorts of levels in between. But the word intuition in the arena of Veda is a very interesting word. And I give a lot of lectures on the structure of the Veda. It's such beautiful knowledge, you know, the whole crystalline structure of the Veda. And you have Shruti, you have Smriti, you have the Puranas, and within Shruti, which is the very structure of the Absolute itself, you know, and that's where the Rig Veda is. You know, you have Samaveda, Yajurveda, Tharva Veda. That's where the Upanishads, you know, all that is, the Ranikas, all that is structured within the Absolute. And that's all called Shruti. And then you have the relative, and that's all called, that whole field of knowledge is called Vedic literature, meaning that it's Purusheya, Purusheya, it's man-made versus that which is not man-made, Purusheya. And then you have, and that's all, you know. Well, if I start throwing out too many Vedic terms, people get confused, and so I'll stop right there with that. But then there's also the gap between. That's called well, I'll throw out one more term. This Smriti. It's called memory. It's what we remember of the Absolute. So the memory can be very clear, or it can have different degrees of vagueness. We all have some memory. If we had no memory, we'd be dead. You know, it's the memory that maintains the integrity of our physiology, our health. It's the memory of the physiology that is the homeostasis that heals the cut. And but now it is that field within the relative, and you could then includes the aspect of our psychology and everything else, that is called the Puranas. And the Puranas are the memory. It's kind of like within the field of our psyche. It's our psyche that views through Smriti, through our memory, views the Absolute. And that's how our intuition, on a very deep level, our intuition works. That's how we, because see, the Absolute, and the modern physics will tell you this, in the whole idea of the manifestation of existence, it occurs before space-time, before there's any space, before there's any time. And now I give lectures on this, but you know, how can there be something before time? Well, I don't want to get into that as a whole. That's a lecture in and of itself, that whole structure. But nevertheless, the idea is that that's how, with respect to intuition, we can see into the future. And we could say it's just that you look into the momentum of karma, if you want to put it that way. That might help a little bit. It's actually more than that, but that's good. We can just leave it there. And then there are these techniques called the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which I taught. And there's a Patanjali Yoga Sutra of Maharishi Patanjali, who was around thousands of years ago, where he teaches the Yoga Sutra to cultivate intuition. And that's exactly how he does it. In that Yoga Sutra is he teaches how to enter and view Smriti from the relative. It's a whole field of, you could say, prana, cultivating prana, that ability, you could say. Anyway, bottom line really about counterintuitive rather, is that some things are counterintuitive. By and large, it's common sense. When everything that's being said is all counterintuitive, that viewpoint, that worldview, that cultural mentality is askew. And time to take a step back. You can love people, and they can go way astray, be it through left-handed tantra, be it through drugs, be it through just association with the wrong people. But you need to take care of yourself. Like it said, it's hard enough to take care of yourself and change yourself. And you don't serve yourself, and you don't serve other people if when they go way out of kilter. At some point, you serve them best as well as yourself best if you distance yourself at least to some degree. You can continue to love them. You can continue to care about them. You can continue to support them, but not in a manner that compromises your own life.
There's a couple comments, Michael.
Go ahead, Scotty.
Somebody had commented, is Satanism counterintuitive?
Of course. Isn't that a great question? Is Satanism counterintuitive? By definition, Satanism is counterintuitive by definition. Is there more to say about that? Do I need to clarify that? By definition, what is Satanism? Okay. There's only divine. The only absolute is the divine. There is no absolute non-divine. There is only the divine and lack of awareness of the divine. Lack of awareness of the divine means lack of awareness of one's own true nature. And that is called the devil. That is called Satan. It can be a very powerful state of mind. It can have a very powerful influence. And that goes right along with what I was saying. If there's a counter mentality there that people are lost to, you do your best to sidestep it. it's not healthy, and it's not rooted in um, the underlying basis of existence. There's only the unified field, which is the source of all things, and lack of awareness of the unified field. It's physics. It's physics. You see, there's this source of life, the source of existence that birthed the whole universe. That's just physics, unified field of physics. And then once we get into that, it's so huge and vast that in the evolution of species at some level lack a full understanding of it. And so it's called projection. We project a limited understanding onto it, and we become identified with that limited understanding. And if those understandings are limited, and then we create counterintuitive perspectives that are distorted and twisted, then we can create all sorts of beliefs. Demonic beliefs that we project on the world, project on other people. I guess that's responsive enough, huh, Scotty?
Yeah, I think a lot of people right now are kind of, it's almost like the biblical things, where Jesus saves is on one end, and then there's the other ones that are like, the devil is coming, and there's this big battle that's happening.
Oh yeah. Right? Okay. All right. So the deal on that is that we live in a dualistic world, right and wrong, left and right, up and down. So when we take this concept of the absolute and the relative, and then we view it from the perspective of the relative, then it's kind of like we take this process of, the unified field and the manifestation of the unified field, and we kind of turn it on its head. We kind of do it like that. And so then it becomes no longer good and evil, God and devil. And so we turn it into a relative thing, right and left, whereas really it's unified field, God, if you will, and lack of awareness of God. But we make it into these two things that are right and left, north and south, that kind of a thing. I hope that helps. Was there another thing, Scotty? Another comment?
Yeah, no, I think, everybody just, like you see it in the mainstream, like entertainment where, there's like, I forgot, there was just some award show or something where they were just like real Satan kind of, they were dressing up as devils and this and that.
Yeah,
and
I think I heard.
they're making this big battle, and
I think it was halftime entertainment at the Super Bowl. I think I heard.
Yeah, I think that's one of them. But it's like, wow, I don't. I think what you said about the fact that ultimately there is no confusion, there is no distortion, because everything is ultimately, divine. That it's just
there's divine, but there is a lack of awareness of divine.
Right. Yeah, there's that.
And once that happens, people get really confused, and that's where this whole counterintuitive culture came from, really.
Yeah.
Well, if there's more, Scotty, great. Otherwise, all these current events, you can just read it. It's in the blog. I think it's all going to get straightened out. I really do. Right now, the world's pretty screwed up, but I think it's going to get straightened out. We got a couple of years to go.
Michael, I remember you talking about like the astral realm in some of our talks over the years, and one of the things you said is that the more you put into it, the more strength it gives. Yeah. Is that I don't know if I'm saying it right, but is that kind of like this whole, some of this confusion around the angels and devils and that kind of
What
thing.
you put your attention on grows stronger. You know, how maybe even a more pragmatic way of seeing it is how you frame things matter. And all too often, people get something in their head and they frame things a certain way, even in a relationship. Somebody says something, it hits you a certain way. You frame it a certain way in your head. This is what they meant. And oh my God. And you just start building it up and building it up. And before you know it, some little throwaway line that they didn't even mean the way you took it gets built up into this thing where you just are so angry with that person. And it's not even what they meant. And we frame all of life different ways. So you pay attention to how you frame things, because what that ultimately does is it frames your life. There's that, I think it's a Mormon song, isn't it? Or something. It's a joy to be simple, you know? And life can be very simple. We all want a simple life. We all want a beautiful life. But we are so predisposed to framing things in a very counterintuitive, twisted manner. And it's just the way the world is spinning right now. So just take care, you know? Take care. You know, when you see something that's twisted and convoluted, don't get wrapped up in the weeds with it all, you know? All right, I guess that's it for this week. You can read the current events. I think it's good to address them, but I don't want to get wrapped up in those weeds. You know, I talk about them more than I'd like to, but it's just the way the times are. We have to talk about it some. Okay, thanks for listening, and we'll talk again more next week.